So for those who don't know, I'm sure you all know by now, but Jen, longtime friend of the show, she's running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz again, which I can't believe you would do this. Debbie is one of the sweetest people, least corrupt members of Congress. So I don't know why you would challenge her, Jen. No.
What?
In all seriousness, though, this is a serious challenge. And I think that what you've been able to accomplish, it's got to have Debbie afraid. So talk to us about the status of the campaign. I know that you are doing your best to get her attention. She's pretending like you don't exist, as I understand it. But talk to me about the strategy this time and what's different from the last time.
So, in terms of I'm not necessarily trying to get her attention. I'm trying to get AIPAC's attention. I want them to come for me. The thing is, her strategy is to pretend that this isn't happening.
Yeah.
So she's out doing things that would otherwise be called campaigning, but she just does it under the, her professional job. She does it under her position. So, and there's obviously plenty of reasons for a sitting congressperson to be at different places. And so she doesn't really need to campaign. She just does her job. But she's definitely been showing up a lot more since she found out that she's being challenged. She's been showing up. I don't know that she would have been here this summer. I don't know, but I feel pretty good about it. We did some polling, and I feel like we're in a pretty good position right now. We're hitting about 500 doors a day.
Wow.
Right now. Yeah. And I mean, we've got, I want to say, like 10 canvassers that are just out full time. And then there's also volunteers. So it's like two different contingencies of people. We're much more structured and organized with our field operation this time than we were last time, because we didn't know what we know. And also our district is easier and more manageable now, because we no longer have a huge chunk of Dade County that used to be in our district that made it really it was a pain.
Yeah.
It was a pain. So it's actually seemingly easier. But I mean, this is still an uphill thing.
Yeah.
There's a reason incumbents win.
Right. And last time it was so frustrating because I felt like you all had so much momentum, and then you and every other candidate, you were hit with COVID. And all of a sudden you had to relearn how to campaign in a pandemic. And even though COVID is still with us, things are very much different now. So here's what I'm really curious about. I think this last week or so has shown us that a lot of Democratic Party voters, not all of them, but a lot of them, they have undying loyalty to the Democratic Party. And in this district, they have one of the most corrupt establishment Democrats. So what is the experience when canvassers and you talk to people about Debbie Wasserman Schultz? Like, are they sticking to her? If so, what's the reasons? Or are they willing to abandon her for somebody who's objectively better in every conceivable way? Like, what's the temperature currently in that district?
So it's very interesting because, look, she has her people, right? And they're really more like sycophants than supporters, but she has her people. And that's fine. That's great. But the reality is, and I've been saying this for quite some time, is she has nowhere to expand. She's not ever getting new voters. Nobody is coming of age, registering to vote and jazzed and going to vote for her. That's not happening. She's not getting new voters. Nobody's moving to Florida from out of state, registering to vote for the first time and running out to vote for Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Like that's not what happens. So her attrition rate is her voters die off every year. So, that's just the nature of when you appeal to older people.
Yeah.
But she still does have her people. I will say this, when I was knocking doors in 20, we seemed to have gotten a lot more, we're with Debbie. We're with Debbie. Oh, sorry, I'm with Debbie. Whereas this time it's like a 10th. It's much less. It's much less. And I will say this, and this has been really interesting, and I've been told this by a few different canvassing duos, even among people that are Debbie supporters, people have been acknowledging, maybe it's time for a change. Maybe she's been there too long. So it's definitely shifted, but no, she's got her people that'll go down with the ship for sure.
Yeah, the dead enders.
But that's okay. That's okay. They're going to go down with the state of Israel too. It's like basically the same people can all go down there together.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you're kind of finding a ceiling for Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Oh, completely.
And that's really, I think that's encouraging because you're starting to learn the parameters of like where she's at, how much further you have to go. Here's one thing that I'm super curious about. So Debbie Wasserman Schultz is an enthusiastic supporter of genocide. And I think that she believes she's representing her constituents because there's a lot of Jewish people in this district. I feel like it's offensive for her to make that assumption because Jewish people, like all people, are not a monolith. And you take the opposite approach. You are very much anti-genocide, which feels so weird to say because I feel like, it should be the default position, right?
Right, right.
But it's not, unfortunately. We have a large portion of the Democratic Party supporting it. So what has been the response to people? Has this even really come up that much in this race? And if it has, what do people say to what you're saying? Because, I mean, what you're saying isn't radical to people with common sense, but like politically speaking, comparatively speaking, you juxtaposed with any other Democrat seems like night and day. So what has the response been?
Yeah. It's a mixed bag. I mean, look, I've been very open about that I was raised Zionist and I grew up in a very Jewish community, and a lot of my, the people I grew up with and family are still very much in that. Mm-hmm. And that is definitely a certain contingency of our district. That definitely, they are there. But since our district the lines were redrawn again, where we lost that big portion of Dade County, we also gained a town called Miramar. But the end result is right now our district is 46% Latino. Mm. And so, and I would also say that a very vast majority of the very pro-Zionist people that are in this district are registered Republicans.
Oh, okay.
Vast majority. Like that's just seems to be where that which makes sense. I mean, that's just how it goes. So they don't vote in our closed primary. And those are also not doors that we canvass. So that's what people don't really like. We're only knocking, when you're canvassing for a primary, we're only knocking Democrat voters because we have closed primaries. So it only makes sense to hit Democrat voters. So that right there narrows the amount of like rabid Zionists that you're going to encounter just in that. Because most people, and I mean even most Jews, are not with this. Mm-hmm. And even if they're not taking a stand or being like me or being outspoken about it, they're not on board with it.
Yeah.
That is not the majority of people. And she is not speaking for the people of this district. She is not speaking for the majority of constituents. In fact, the majority of people here, that's not even in like their top handful of key issues, with the exception of certain vulnerable communities like our Muslim community, Palestinian community. Right. Like for them, it's obviously. But when I'm on the dialer or I'm canvassing and I ask people like, what are your key issues? That's not what it is. Number one, housing. Number one is housing. Healthcare is also usually big. That's, of course, my biggest, because I think it will help the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time, single payer healthcare. Mm-hmm. But no, housing and affording to live. That is what most people are concerned with. And the privileged people that are in this district, that their concern is Israel. Some of them are just going to go with her because if that's how they're going to vote, that's how they're going to vote, but yeah. I'm not coming into contact with it. I definitely get hate mail, but I don't see a lot of it. Like I don't see mostly anything because I'm not on social media, but yeah, there's definitely haters.
I would imagine you've also probably experienced a lot of anti-Semitism as well, speaking out, because whenever we hear somebody like Bernie Sanders, for example, even tepidly criticize Israel or say that, we should stop shipping weapons to Israel, people call him like a self-hating Jew or say that, there's all these tropes that come up. So have you encountered that as well? Or has it been not like a big enough issue in the campaign to where thankfully you haven't really experienced that much vitriol?
I mean, I get it, but I don't see it because Peter filters. Peter's really my filter. So, right. Like, so I don't see it because the truth is I don't need it in my headspace.
Yeah.
Unless somebody is bringing forward previously unknown factual information that in some way might affect my opinion on the state of Palestine, then I really don't need to hear your negative nonsense. Right. Like that, there's just no point. So it hasn't been that bad for me. And I'm just done. I'm not even pretending. I'm not walking the fine line. I do not believe in the existence of a Zionist state. I do not believe in the existence of an ethno-state. I think that there is no difference to me between Zionism and Christian nationalism or the Third Reich. All these forms of white nationalism is essentially what we're talking about. And the fact that they do it in the name of Judaism is especially disgusting. But what we're talking about is the same thing as what we've seen in these other times genocide's been committed. It's all the same. So no, I don't support the existence of a white supremacist state. So I wouldn't support the existence of a Zionist state. And so, and I'm not dancing around it. I don't think there's no two state. There's none of that.
Yeah.
I'm just done.
It just feels unrealistic at this point and almost disingenuous to still say, yeah, I support a two-state solution. How are you going to have a two-state solution when Palestine has basically been erased? I mean, it feels really unrealistic. And I know that, sometimes people say that the folks who are saying one-state solution with equal rights for everyone, that's the most unrealistic. But I feel like that's actually the most pragmatic at this point, because I don't know how else you do it. So I am glad to see you actually just kind of say what needs to be said, because I think people still are delusional, for lack of a better word, about the fact that a two-state solution it's all dead and gone. And, as Avi Shlaim said, Israel's the one who killed it.
Did you know that? Did you know that? It was never meant to be real.
Yeah.
There was never meant to be two states. No. Actually, it was created as a propaganda talking point for Zionists to use to help facilitate their ability to create the Jewish state. They had no intention of ever doing that. There was never going to be. And that's something that people don't understand. And when people like, I would say Joe Biden, but not this current Joe Biden, because he very well might not know what he's saying. But let's say 10 years ago, Joe Biden, or my Congresswoman, or people that are capable and have been exposed to the truth, that know they're just full of crap. They know damn well there's no such thing as a two-state solution. There's never been any such thing as a two-state solution. That's always been a lie told by Zionists to sell their nonsense, to justify what they were doing. So I will not abide that. And that's the thing. I'm done being gaslit by these people.
Yeah.
Completely done being gaslit by them. I don't know how anybody is saying that something isn't happening that we're watching happen in real time.
Yeah, and it's funny how, the people who say that there's still, a possibility of a two-state solution, it's the politicians, it's the propagandists, but the people who are saying that that's not a possibility, it's the historians. It's the Israeli historians, Avi Shlaim, for example. It's the experts. So I'm going to side with them as opposed to the politicians who are paid to say what, they are saying. Here's one thing that I wanted to ask you about really badly. So this whole time, Joe Biden has been recalcitrant, refusing to act, refusing to exert even a minimal amount of pressure. He's paused one weapon shipment, which is specifically 2,000-pound bombs. That's it. So all this time I thought, okay, you know what? It's not that commitment to Israel. It's not just corruption. I think he's actually ideologically committed. Post-debate, my thoughts have changed. I actually think that odds are he doesn't know what he's doing. Maybe he's not even aware to a certain extent. And that's why Netanyahu is able to capitalize on him, because no other president, Republican or Democrat, would allow themselves to be humiliated this much. So I'm curious on your take about Biden. Do you honestly think that cognitive decline is part of it? I'm genuinely considering that as a possibility. I mean, we don't know. This is all just, supposition. But what are your thoughts on that? Because it's so, even this week we learned about the Lancet study that the death count is much, much higher. It's 186,000 estimated, and that's the conservative number. It could be as high as 200,000. And, silence from everyone on that. So, if that doesn't change, then there has to be, it's not just the commitment to Zionism. Everybody has their limits. And by now, I feel like we should have reached that, even if you're Joe Biden, tanking his election chances. What's going on? I know that I'm asking you to kind of speculate on his own mentality, which is impossible.
Yeah,
but from your perspective, why do you think he refuses to budge? He's literally ride or die with Israel.
Okay, so I think both things are true. So this is what's interesting. So one, I think there's absolutely cognitive decline.
Yeah.
I've considered this to be some form of elder abuse for the better part of 3 years at this point. And I actually have said several times that, to me, I look at his wife with a certain amount of stink eye, because I feel like that would be her job. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like that's your person's job, is to make sure that you're not going around being a bumbling person and looking stupid, and you're not going around looking like that because you're really out like a fish out of water. But I don't think that's why nothing's happening with Israel. I think that's the opportunity to allow it to happen easier, possibly, but I think that would be happening regardless. And I think that that's more of a testament to like somebody like Anthony Blinken, and I mean,
Mm.
or whoever the person in charge of that or group of persons in charge is, and it is not Joe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we all know that. Don't we know that? I mean, we know that. I mean, I guess there's some people that don't. They think maybe Joe Biden is actually running the show. But even if Joe weren't, as I think, incapacitated as he is, that's still not how this works.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we know that. And even if it's something as much as whoever the military industrial complex, deep state advisors, blah, 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 it's all the same. And it doesn't matter who's in the White House anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like the reason why, especially after this week, I've been thinking about this more, is because it's almost like they have, not to kink shame, like they have a humiliation fetish, right? Like, especially after everything that they said with regard to the ICC and Russia. Seeing Biden condemn, Russia's bombing of a hospital, of a children's hospital. I'm like, yeah, of course that's absolutely horrible and they should be condemned. But after Israel has bombed multiple hospitals, why can't you condemn them too? Why can't you hold them to the same standard as Russia? And so it feels so
Like,
frustrating.
Israel has the right to defend itself.
Yeah, I mean, that would not fly for Russia or any other country, nor should it. But he gives
No.
Israel a pass. It's really frustrating. I want to kind of get your thoughts on the Biden situation. So, if you were a member of Congress right now, what would you be doing? Would you call on him to drop out, or would you remain silent? What would be your thoughts on this whole situation? Because it is a risk. If you ask him to drop out, whoever goes up there, it would probably be Kamala Harris. It's a risk, but what do you think is the best calculation for Democrats, self-interested Democrats currently? Like,
Right.
what would you do?
Honestly, there is nothing they can do. It doesn't matter who they put in at this point. I don't care whether it's Gretchen Whitmer or Gavin Newsom. Kamala Harris has lower ratings than Joe, so that just doesn't make sense. But then the idea to skip over her and put someone else in, that pisses people off.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they can't win anyway. That's what I think. I think that what they should be doing is regrouping, focusing on down ballot races and ballot initiatives and things that we might have some control over, accept that loss, take the L, and build up so that maybe 4 years from now you have some semblance of an infrastructure in place that isn't just like the mess that this is. But no, they won't do that. We don't do that. The national won't do that. The state won't do that. And this is part of why I'm not into the party politics. I'm just not. I mean, I am a registered Democrat. I've always been a registered Democrat, with the exception of the year post Bernie when I Dem exited. But I don't affiliate with how they run the party. I would be an old school Democrat, so I really wouldn't have anything to say to them. I certainly wouldn't be out there, promoting Joe.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be trying to sell that. But I really don't think they have anything to sell right now. So if they want people to be supporting them and promoting them, then they need to be worthy of promotion, because right now they're bleeding people like a sieve. And I mean, like in Florida, the Republicans outnumber us here by like 860,000 in the state of Florida.
Wow.
And that doesn't include, and that's just Republicans over Democrats. That's not no parties, which is the majority of people. Right. So, numerically, they can't win. And right now, the way that Joe has handled all of this stuff, or at least how people perceive him as handling this stuff, he's not winning the states he needs to win. Yeah. He's not winning Michigan. He's not like that's just not happening. That ship sailed. And I don't know what to tell them. I would start just preparing for, 4 years from now, because this is the only thing that could possibly save them would be whatever RFK's effect could potentially be, that if he pulled more from Trump or whatever. But I seem to find him pulling equally.
Yeah, I've seen that too. It depends on the poll. Like most polls, I think, show him pulling more from Biden, but he does take from Trump as well.
Yeah.
Which that's, and I've made this point, that's all the more reason why they should let him debate, because as soon as people hear him, they're going to be like, oh my God, no, never mind. Because I've had young people in my life reach out and they're like, hey, do you know anything about RFK? Because they're dissatisfied with Biden. And I'm like, yeah, he's terrible. He supports genocide. He's anti-vax. And they'll be like, oh. And so I think that people are so hungry for an alternative right now. They're looking at other people. So, like, you see these polls about young support for RFK Jr. I think that is mostly a house of cards. All it takes is people learning about him, and then they're turned off immediately. Here's what I think is the problem for Democrats. And I think that you may be right, unfortunately, that regardless of what they do, they might be cooked. Although I will say that anyone besides Joe, I think, would have a better chance so long as he drops out and gives them enough time to make their case. But I think that part of the problem is Democrats have kind of overcorrected in one way. They've never been braggadocious like Republicans. Like with Donald Trump, he would talk about how, oh my God, the economy is the best economy ever. And Democrats do need to brag about their accomplishments, of course. But the reason why that didn't help Trump in 2020 was because even though you talk about all these wonderful things, the stock market, you're not acknowledging that people are still struggling. And now that's kind of a problem for Biden as the incumbent, right? The economy is improving when you look at the numbers. The stock market, doing great. But when you talk to a normal person, things are more expensive. They're still struggling. The average cost, or I think the median cost of a house now is over $500,000. That's $500,000. So my generation, so many people are locked out of buying a house and creating generational wealth. So I think that if you just be braggadocious and you say, hey, everything's amazing, I saved the country, and you don't acknowledge that there's more work to be done, you're kind of pissing people off. You're turning them off. And so he's not learning from the mistakes that Trump made in 2020. And I think that really what Democrats have to do is they have to put forward an economic agenda, which they just have not done. In fact, I don't even know what Biden's agenda is for 2024.
He doesn't have one.
Yeah, he doesn't talk about it.
It's just not Trump. That's the problem. They do not give me anything to sell.
Mm-hmm.
You like what is it that I'm selling? Right? I promote a 21st century economic bill of rights. I could tell you what that is. I could tell you what I think we should have. I believe in single payer healthcare. I believe in a federal job guarantee with a living wage job. All of these things. And the Democrats don't fight for any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is it they're doing?
Yeah, it's frustrating because this is the third presidential cycle now where their message is seemingly just Trump bad. Yeah. And I think
that's on purpose.
Of course, yeah, because it's very, the bar is very low. As long as you're not Trump, that's great.
Yep.
And look, I feel like by now, the people who are voting against Trump, they know he's bad. I think, to be clear, I think it's important that they talk about Project 2025. I'm glad that they're doing that. But as I've said, every single election so far since Donald Trump entered politics is you have to have a he's bad, but here's what we're going to do. And there's just a he's bad, but no counter. And that's a problem. I think that they don't realize how normal people interpret these things. Like, yes, you can tell the average voter that Trump is a threat to democracy, and they acknowledge that. But at the same time, voters are self-interested, and they will prioritize themselves above American democracy. That's just the way that they are. So, if they think, okay, you know what? Maybe Trump is right that the economy was better under him because I just remember things better that way. I mean, who knows why people come to that conclusion, right? That's what will ultimately lead for them to vote for Donald Trump. Voters are so mushy and fickle that you can't just assume that they're going to come out and vote against Donald Trump, which is something that the Democratic Party just has not learned. And every single, election cycle, we get the same arguments about how, oh my God, this is, the most important election ever, which I actually agree with. I think the elections subsequently have been more important, but they're not selling us. They're saying, oh my God, well, if you don't vote for Biden, if you vote for third party, you're helping Donald Trump. Listen, third party candidates, they're going to be there every single election cycle. Even when Trump is out of the picture, the Republican is going to be bad. Like from here on out, they're going to be worse. That's how they've just been getting worse. So you've got to have a message. And it's really, really frustrating to see that they don't.
because they don't really have, because they all answer to the same corporate donors. So they don't want things like healthcare. They don't want to regulate the housing. They don't want their friends over at BlackRock to not be making a killing. They don't want that. So what is it that they're going to offer to do for you differently than the Republicans, other than they're better on women's reproductive choice in theory, although they didn't do anything to protect it. And they're better on LGBTQ issues, also important. I'm not saying it's not important, but when it comes to our economics, when it comes to people being able to afford to live and afford a $400 emergency and afford a roof over their head, it makes no difference. And I will tell you that the only people that I encounter whose primary concern is Donald Trump are all privileged white people.
That doesn't
without
that doesn't
fail. I have
surprise
not
me.
come
Yeah.
across. Yeah. I can go into, I spend the majority of my time when I'm here, like in terms of like when I'm on the ground instead of on the phone, in vulnerable neighborhoods. And that issue, the Trump, that does not even come up in the top 10. That's just not what they're concerned about. And the reason is that people who, let's say I've been on a picket line to get our $15 minimum wage, women that are working 3 jobs, one of them is at McDonald's or whatever, their life is no worse under Donald Trump than under Joe Biden, right? Like there's no difference to them. And for the most part, I get that, because at that level, it isn't, because the corporate takeover and the oligarchy is nonpartisan. So this is a capital problem. And so both parties right now are equally beholden to capital. That's it. So unless your key issue is women's reproductive choice or LGBTQ issues, and that's your primary thing, there's no difference.
Yeah, I think
and the only people that focus on those issues generally tend to be more privileged people.
Well, it depends. I think that the like LGBTQ people focus on it and whatnot too, but I think that what they need to do is they need to have a strong economic message, and they need to make people feel the changes, because a lot of people, they're not as engaged as you and I, so they just live their life and they feel like things just kind of continue to get worse, and at this point, they go back and forth. Okay, well, I'm still feeling not very confident in, what I can do. So I guess I'll go with the other guy, and I'll go with the other guy next time. And that's really as simple as it is. Not to be a reductionist, but that's kind of how voters operate, right? They blame whoever's in charge if they're not feeling well.
Yes. Well, that's what happened to Trump. See, Joe Biden really didn't win as much as Trump lost because of COVID. And had there not been COVID, I don't think Joe Biden would have won the first time. And in all reality, he really didn't win hugely. And he has now done significantly worse in terms of like where he is polling wise. Like the numbers just don't add up for him being able to win. But at the end of the day, I don't think that the Democrats, and when I say the Democrats, I don't mean the regular people that are out there working and voting. I mean the people like party leadership people.
Yeah.
The reason that they don't fight for those things is because they don't care. They don't affiliate with labor. Explain to me why the Democratic Party is more affiliated with Wall Street than labor, and how that could potentially be part of the problem, and why maybe they don't get turnout and people, why they don't have an economic plan. Well, maybe that's why they can't get labor people to be in their party. So they have a real problem. And right now, labor is what's rising up.
Yeah.
And if the Democrats had really any sense of real care, that's what they'd be hitching themselves to.
What I will say, to Joe Biden's credit, is his NLRB has been fantastic. And I think that him actually going to a picket line for the first time ever to talk to union workers who were striking, that was something that really gave me hope, because it's like, okay, he knows, he's not perfect. He shut down the railroad strike, for example, but that's a really still it's a really important sign. The problem is that the people who are engaged enough to know about that, like young people, labor, they're engaged enough to know that he's also funding a genocide. So all the positives are kind of taken away by the negatives. Like that's such a big negative that you can't overcome that.
That's the problem. That's a red line.
Yeah.
I would have always said in my entire life that genocide is the line.
Yeah.
That's the line. I've always said we have no business being involved in other people's political affairs, other countries' political affairs, unless someone's committing a genocide. And
Hmm.
if and when that's happening is when the hammer of Thor in the form of the entire world comes down on them and says, no, sorry, that's just not how we're going to roll.
Hmm.
And that's really, to me, the only time when I would interfere is
Yeah.
that. So it's beyond just like one thing. Like it's the thing. And for me, it's his legacy.
Right.
And sadly, he's probably not even capable of knowing that.
Yeah, I think that he is very Trumpian in a lot of ways. He's very narcissistic, and this week we're kind of seeing that the Joe Biden, who he tries to sell himself as, like this kind, truthful person, he's kind of a narcissistic prick who's only thinking about himself, refusing to drop out,
Oh,
attacking members of his own party. There's, an article in Semaphore that kind of describes his strategy as mutually assured destruction, where he's daring Democrats. All right, I'm staying in, so try to
yeah.
challenge me. Because if I lose, then that's going to get blamed on you. It's really frustrating. And one thing that I feel like only a few Democrats understand is that Trump's base of support that they have to beat, it's kind of always the same size. Trump did grow his support in 2020, but generally speaking, Republicans, they always have the same loyal base of support.
Yeah.
Democrats, it's always going to come down to turnout, right? When turnout is low, Democrats lose. When turnout is high, Democrats win. And so, like, that should dictate your strategy in perpetuity, right? You always try to galvanize young people. You try to win over independents, working class independents who aren't really political. They're more apolitical, but they just don't really vote. And I feel like they don't get it. They always pivot back to the whole, well, Nikki Haley voters are lost right now. Maybe we could win them over. And I think that, to your point, it's because if they actually did have a real populist working class message, that would piss off their donors. So they're stuck in this corner where they have to, talk about Donald Trump in perpetuity. And again, like I have raised the alarm about Donald Trump. He is an absolute threat to democracy. But normal people, they're not going to come out and vote if they don't actually think their lives are going to change. I don't think people understand like the things that Trump can do. Like when you talk about, Schedule F, for example, Trump wanting to dismantle the administrative state. I think that people don't really understand what that would look like, in consolidating power, how that's really damaging. But they can understand that, life has been more difficult and they're struggling to pay rent. And just people, they feel like they're not being listened to. So Democrats really have to level with folks. And I watched this segment from The Daily Show where one of the hosts spoke with black voters. 3 of them were pro-Biden, 3 of them were pro-Trump. And the Trump ones said, and this is in response to, polls showing that Biden is kind of slipping with black voters, which is alarm. Like it's freak out time. And they were saying that, the ones who are going to Trump, they're saying that they feel like Democrats, they keep making promises, but they don't deliver. They only get talked about during election cycles. And, that doesn't mean that Trump's going to be better because obviously he's so much worse. But, at some point in time, the chickens come home to roost and voters start to realize that, maybe Democrats don't actually care. And I think a lot of people this week are wondering, like, do Democrats even want to win, given how many of them are just like rallying around Biden? Is it cowardice? So they're in such a bad shape. And really what they need are people who can inspire individuals like you. But, you don't get the institutional support. You're kind of seen as this outlier, even though you represent the party. If you go issue by issue, you represent what the Democratic Party base wants.
That's and that's what's so interesting. And I'm very comfortable in that the majority of my personal positions do fall in line with the majority of people. So it would be easy for me to represent it, right? Because the job of your representative isn't to do what they want and then tell you what they did. Right? Like that's not how this is supposed to work. So in theory, let's say I'm elected and there's something that I have a personal opinion about, but the majority of people want the opposite, right? Well, I'm going to do what the majority of people want to do because that's the nature of this job. Now, and that's, so for me, it's fortunate that for the most part, with the exception of capital punishment, I'm on the majority side of issues. So with the exception of that one thing, everything, I'm on the majority: single payer healthcare, living wage, ending wars for profit, even tuition-free public college, trade school, everything. Most people support these things. So it's not radical.
Yeah, no, it's not at all. It's common sense, really.
Yes.
Especially for issues like, I'm glad that you really kept the torch lit when it comes to healthcare. I understand why most people aren't as fixated on it, because Biden won and he only supports a public option, but hasn't even pushed for that. But like, healthcare is, I think, one of the easiest sells. We all deal with health insurance. It's expensive. We pay it every single month. And I feel like just telling people, hey, how would you like to not pay that private tax and pay a smaller public tax but get better healthcare? It's the easiest sell ever. And even with the propaganda, people still support it. So I just feel like, it's such a missed opportunity, because something like that genuinely could get people out. I actually believe that. Like, people would, like, for me, I live in Oregon, so I get my ballot mailed to me. Super simple. I have no reason not to vote. But if I lived in a state where I had to go and wait in line for like hours, depending on what district I'm in, it's going to take a lot to get me off my ass, because that's really inconvenient. And it's going to be even harder to get me off my ass if I'm working and I don't have time, or it's my one day off. So you have to offer people a lot. And we were kind of getting to this point, like when not to give him too much credit, but when he actually announced student debt cancellation, $10,000 to $20,000, I'm like, now we're fucking talking. Now we're talking.
But then what happened?
Right.
It's such a drop in the bucket. And at the end of the day, if we don't start offering tuition-free college and trade school, like if we don't start offering that, then it's really irrelevant. It's such a drop in the bucket what you're going to do, and you're still going to have people accumulating more and more debt. So what's the point of it? Those things have to happen together. And it really, again, I know there's people that have an issue with the idea of paying for other people's education. And it's so interesting to me because just personally, I prefer to be around healthy, educated people.
Right.
That's just me. Now, apparently there's this whole bastion of people that want to be around sick and uneducated people. And it just makes no sense. And it also, it costs us more money. Right. It's not even the fiscally smart thing to do. So it's just, people have been brainwashed and propagandized to this I got me mine, you have to get yours, the collective is bullshit mentality. And that's a problem. And you know what? It's capitalism.
Yeah.
It really is. That's the mentality. And there's no care for the collective. And that's one thing other countries do infinitely better than us, pretty much across the board, is there is a general concern for collective. And that even anywhere from like places like, the UK or even somewhere like Japan or anywhere, pick a place, the idea that you would totally disregard other people's healthcare is just not, it wouldn't even register.
Yeah, it's the whole point of being in a community. I mean, property taxes, they fund schools. Even if you don't have kids, you own a home, you're paying property taxes. That's good. We need to fund schools, but I hate how Republicans are so good at propaganda. When the whole student loan thing dropped, they were talking about how, oh my God, working class people are funding the education of Ivy League graduates, which is so bullshit because, like, if you have a lot of money, you're not going to take out student loans, okay? My family broke as shit. I had to take out student loans. They couldn't pay for my college. Right. But then you had PPP loans being forgiven, not a peep from them. So it's frustrating. And one thing that I will say is that Democrats, they do have to adapt because the message that Republicans use, it's the same message ever, but it's so effective. And it is frustrating that it's so effective. Like, it's always scapegoating, right? And it just depends on who the target is. In midterm elections, 2022, 2023, it was trans people, LGBTQ plus people. Now it seems like they're shifting back to immigrants. And it's always, they just change the target. And until you raise class consciousness, that's always going to be so persuasive, right? Because if you're struggling and Republicans give you an explanation for why you're struggling and they tell you it's immigrants, then even though you don't necessarily know if that's true or not, just instinctively, maybe it doesn't seem right, but it's still an explanation. And you could dupe people into believing that, actually, immigrants, marginalized people in the same class as me, maybe they are to blame. And it's like, it's a way that you pit people of the same class against each other, and it works every single time. So Democrats, even if they don't want to, like, shirk their donors in the healthcare industry, pick a couple of industries and shirk your donors there. It'll make such a huge difference.
They cannot do it.
That's true.
But what's interesting, you're right. So I always say this: Republicans blame immigrants, Democrats blame Republicans, and I know, and both are completely unproductive, and both doesn't get us in any sort of solutional situation.
Yeah.
Also, both are wrong. By the way, both are wrong. And I'll say it. It's one is kicking down and one is punching sideways, but neither is punching up. And that's really what it's designed to keep us doing, both parties. Right. So they just do it differently. But it's all fear-based. So for the Republicans, it's, oh, those immigrants are coming to take your jobs and all this. And for Democrats, it's, oh my God, those Republicans are so scary and horrifying. And it's like fear-mongering playbook 101. And it does work. It's very effective. But it's going to run its course. It's going to run its course, and we're seeing it now. But what something you said before about like Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, I would suggest that the fact that we're in this predicament with this choice is a sign that we've already lost our democracy. I would suggest that the studies that came out that said only 0.001% of the population have their wishes heard in Congress or have their will met in policy is a sign that we no longer really have a democracy. And Trump is disgusting. Don't get me wrong. Not a fan. I didn't like him in the 80s. Like, I've never liked him. So this is not new. But he is a symptom of the problem, not the problem. And I also think, really, I can't think of someone who represents how we are perceived in the world better.
Yeah, that's unfortunately something I agree with.
And it's, I think what really bothers people, it's very almost like Freudian in a way when you think about it. Like, you don't like him because you don't want to look in that mirror.
Yeah.
Because the fact that someone like that has gotten to that point, I think it's very telling. And I think people would rather blame someone else. But the truth is, he represents us perfectly.
I hate to say that I agree, but you're absolutely right. And he is a symptom of the problem. And what you said is so true about how, Republicans blame immigrants and marginalized people and Democrats blame Republicans. And right there, you kind of have the answer. Like, what's the antidote to that? The antidote is left-wing policies, because if you actually provide for people economically and they're not so desperate, they're not going to be susceptible to that level of radicalization, which is why you always see after a fascist or before a fascist, a leftist saves the day. FDR back in the day, Lula in Brazil. We just saw the left in France stop a fascist takeover. They teamed up with centrists, but we see this again and again and again. The antidote to fascism is left-wing policies, because if you provide for people,
we don't like to use the word socialism, but yes, you're having a populist uprising, and this has been happening, and we've been feeling it. It's bubbling, right? There's this populist uprising. It's going to go left or right. And I remember back in 2015, and I remember saying to a lot of people what I'm saying right now, which we are seeing an uprising. It's going to go left or right. Your next president is going to be Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump. Choose wisely. And they all got behind Hillary because they figured Bernie's too radical.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, Hillary's the safe. We got his. I'm like, I told you, choose wisely, because when you see uprisings, right? Like, this is stuff that's historical. This is patterns. This is nothing new. This is not rocket science. You can trace it like anything else with uprisings, economy, like this is how this goes, empire. And at the end of the day, neither party is addressing any of those things because they both are they're just wings of the same bird, different wings, same bird, same corporate bird. But yes, punching down, keeping us distracted, not helping. The way we have to deal with these things, and people don't want to hear it, is certain things ought not be for profit. You have to take the profit motive out of things like healthcare, corrections, education. There has to be, like, certain public goods need to be what we provide as universal basic services.
Mm-hmm.
And those things are non-negotiable things, and those things cannot have a profit motive.
Mm-hmm.
And until we get to that point, that's what it, I mean, that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah. And it's a good solution because, there's going to be propaganda and pushback and people say, ew, socialism, icky. But then once you give it to them, they don't want you to take it away. Look at Medicare. Look at Social Security. I mean, Republicans support Social Security. Social, it's in the name. That's a socialist program. So if you provide for people in a way that is transformative and material, that's how you make it so Republicans are no longer a threat, where they have to moderate, because scapegoating immigrants and queer people and people of color, it's not going to work, because now you think, oh, well, you know what? I'm actually doing well, so I don't think that the problems that currently exist are because of them. I'm doing okay. I don't feel like they're taking my jobs or, anything like that. So, yeah, I feel like we just solved all the country's problems, Jen.
We did. And also, you could also, as far as the immigration problem is concerned, and I have mixed thoughts on whether or not I consider it a quote unquote problem versus just, life. But but the penalties should never be on the least of these. The penalties for any of that needs to be on the corporations that hire people and pay them horrid wages. And they're the ones who are not only hurting the immigrants, but hurting American workers, right? Like, it's hurting on both ends. And there's never penalties for those companies. They don't have the penalties. So there's definitely ways to deal with the immigrant work situation. And I'm very open to all different suggestions on that. I don't have any one fixed concept as to the best policy for immigration, but I do know that for me, the key thing is how we treat people who are at the border.
Yeah.
I don't care what you decide your policy is regarding the length of time for citizenship. I do believe every person should be treated the same. I think there needs to be two categories. People that just want to move here versus people that are seeking asylum. And then within those categories, all countries should be treated equally. I mean, obviously, if you're coming from Australia, you're not going to be able to fairly claim asylum. Okay. Like, you're going to have to, but you know what I mean? And then those processes need to be just and equitable. But regardless of all of that, I don't care. I don't care what people ultimately vote on regarding that. How we are treating human beings is completely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable and completely preventable. That's what's infuriating to me. I don't care if you don't necessarily want to give everybody citizenship papers. I understand there's rules, I get it. But can we treat people kindly? Maybe put them up in some dorms or some housing, and maybe give them some food, and maybe offer them, some job opportunities if they have a good case. Like, I don't know, but I feel like we could do better, Mike. Don't you?
Yeah. It's to me, it's a little bit interesting that whenever we hear people complain about immigrants, it's never European immigrants or Ukrainian immigrants. It's, for some reason, it's always Latin American immigrants. It's Caribbean, Haitian immigrants. There's something there that I can't quite figure out.
What do all of these things have in common?
Yeah, what's the lowest common denominator? It's frustrating. And listen, the conversation has shifted so far to the right that Ronald Reagan would be called an open borders liberal, because he was the one that granted amnesty to millions of immigrants. Now, the prospect of Biden granting amnesty, inconceivable, but Reagan did it. So I feel like it's really like, this is a manufactured problem, because really the main...
Why is it a problem? Why is this a problem?
Well, to the extent that it's a problem is that we just don't have the logistical capacity to process everyone. But the way that you do that is you get more immigration judges to the border, you get more attorneys, and then you fund it. That's it. I don't think you...
It's not complicated.
It's very simple, actually. And anyone who's here currently, you can't just kick them out. That would actually have severe economic consequences, because they work, they contribute to the economy, they pay taxes, contrary to popular belief. So here's what you do.
Not only do they pay taxes, but they don't get benefits. The amount of people that I've known of and have known that are quote unquote illegal, which I hate that.
It's so awful. Yeah.
But these people actually have to basically fraudulently take names to pay taxes that they work and pay taxes, but they don't ever get the benefits because
Mhm.
they're not here legally. And then you have people talking about it like they're taking our jobs, but then they don't want to work.
It's
But what
literally
is it?
taxation without
They don't want
representation.
to work.
Yeah, no, it's taxation without representation. They can't vote. Contrary to popular belief, Republicans just tried to ram through this bill called the SAVE Act, which bans immigrants from voting in federal elections. They already can't vote in federal elections. So you're just trying to make it seem as if there's this like illegal voting conspiracy happening with immigrants when it's not. Listen, I think it's even more simple than just like getting more immigration judges, because that's like the standard Democrat thing: immigration reform, pathway to citizenship. If you're here now, you're a citizen. You start like that.
I'm with you. Look, I'm open to any and all of that. And that's one of those things that I am extremely flexible. But then again, I could be sold on open borders. And I know that makes people crazy. But I really, like, to me, a lot of this is just made up lines. And, and these are just, right? Like, it's just, it's silly. But I have an even better idea. It's called a federal job guarantee. How about the people that come here? We give them a job, we pay them a living wage, and we fix our infrastructure. How about that? What about that? You know, like there's other solutions, but none of them require barbed wire, razors, people living under bridges, people not being able to get water. That none of that is like, we have just so lost our way.
We don't view people as humans. It's just, us versus them. We made up, as you said, we made up these borders. If you're an astronaut, you go into space, you look down at the planet, you don't see, the state lines. Like, it's just a concept that we made up. So, like, functionally, I support open borders, functionally speaking. I think that it's important to track. Yeah, you could track who comes in the country and whatnot. I think that's important for, like, representation purposes and whatnot. But, you have to have a process.
Everybody can't have a representative if you're not. I mean, you have to keep track.
So, there's a process. But for the most part, if I want to move tomorrow to Canada, I should be able to do that. If somebody wants to move here from Costa Rica to Texas, I feel like they should be able to do that. We should all, as human beings, we should be able to enjoy the entirety of our planet. Like, I know that's some hippy-dippy bullshit, but it's kind of true.
I agree. No, it's true, and I hate it. And something I remember from when I was living in San Antonio in Texas is I had some friends whose families had lived in Texas and owned land in Texas before Texas was part of this country. And those were, in fact, Mexican people. And so then you see how we draw the border. We're like, okay, now Texas, you're part of us. And I kid you not, the amount of people that think of those like historic Mexican families as though those are the immigrants. So I'm living in San Antonio, and there's people literally whose families have been there long before, like forever. And you will have people talk down to those people, like as if they're somehow the foreigners. And I'm thinking, they were here first, actually. We just drew a line around them and said, okay, now you're part of this. But they have lived there for hundreds of years. And so I've seen that firsthand. So what does that mean that someone's an immigrant? Is it because they don't speak your language? Or they're outside your imaginary line?
Yeah, we're all immigrants. I'm Portuguese. Like, why am I in America? Like, why did my family come here? Like, this is like indigenous people. They're the real Americans. So it's always so ironic to me that we have Americans complaining about immigrants when we're kind of the immigrants. Like, if you're white, your ancestors, they chose to come here. So it's a very frustrating conversation.
And it is color based. It is color based because we do know that it's certain immigrants, and that this is it's a very real racist thing, and it's global.
That's for sure.
Too. It's global. It isn't just here. I almost wish that were the case, where it was just us, that was just our problem. But unfortunately, it is not.
And it's going to get worse as climate change continues to ravage communities. Coastal communities in more developing countries, they're not going to be able to stay. Like, the Middle East might be uninhabitable by 2100, according to other reports from last decade. So immigration is a fact of reality. It's a part of life. And, rather than trying to, build a giant wall. We have to adapt in a reasonable and pragmatic way. And that means we reform our immigration system so it's not broken. If it's not broken and you actually give people the ability to come here legally, they will come here legally. The reason why so many people come here illegally is because our system is broken. And even if you're one of the good immigrants and you try to come here, you try to do everything right, it is a fucking nightmare.
Yes.
It is a nightmare. Like my friend Ole, she's been here since she was 15 years old, still struggling to get a green card. She's an attorney. I mean, the model citizen. It's.
I didn't know that she wasn't. I didn't know that she had like that she didn't have that, like that she had to deal with.
Yeah,
that. I didn't know.
she's from the Bahamas, and yeah, it's an absolute nightmare. Yeah. So people don't understand, like, even if you try your best, like, nobody wants to be a bad immigrant. Nobody wants to move here illegally. But they don't have the choice to move here legally. Like, it's literally denied to people. And asylum is the only avenue for people to move here. And then when you restrict that and you deny that, as Biden has done, as Trump has done, you're denying people human rights. You're breaking domestic law. It's very frustrating and unnecessary. There's a simple fix: comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship, a quick pathway to citizenship, because people don't need to be in limbo forever. Yeah. And then that's it. Like, it's solved. But this is an issue where it really benefits Republicans, so they don't want to solve it, which is why when, Joe Biden, like the idiot that he is, was like, hey, I'll do your policy. They're like, no. Because we don't benefit from fixing this issue. Are you fucking kidding me? No, of course not.
They don't want to fix that. He hasn't done anything. He's been with the wall. He's all down with the wall.
Yeah.
Maybe that wall will be as effective as the pier that they built. Maybe it'll have that kind of effect, because not that I actually thought that pier had anything to do with helping people. I think it had to do with their offshore oil drilling, but whatever.
Well, I think that, I don't know if this was confirmed, but there was actually I don't know if there's a weapon shipment that came through the pier and whatnot, if it is functional to the extent. Very, very completely unnecessary, but that's a whole nother story. Jen, before you go, I do want to give you the opportunity to just, like, make your pitch to folks. I know there's a little bit of time before the primary, so let us know what you want us to hear and what you need from us in terms of, like, help. If anybody can help you, phone bank, canvas, let us know.
So, look, I'm fighting a corporate monolith, and it's not easy. So we definitely need help. We need donations. And for anybody who's just coming on, my name is Jen Perlman, and I am running in Florida's 25th district. I am challenging Debbie Wasserman Schultz in the Democratic primary. And that is the only way to strategically unseat this particular representative. That's just how it is. Mm-hmm. And I'm fighting for single-payer healthcare, living wage jobs, ending wars for profit. I am of a very hippie mentality myself. I do not need the job, the money, the career. I believe this is supposed to be a term of service. And I'm really just trying to unseat someone who just is a corporate tool. And and it's an offering. And if people think that sounds like something that's appealing, to have somebody with 0 F's to give that person a congressional platform who's fighting for the least of these, and that sounds like something that, appeals, then we need help. So guys, go to gen2024.org. On social media, Gen4 FOR FLAW FL25, Gen4 FL25. And follow the campaign, share, everything helps. Everything helps. Even if a few dollars, it all helps. I spend a lot of time dialing for dollars. So we need money. I mean, I don't have like a typical stump speech. I never do. I don't ever do speeches. I always just sort of just talk off the top of my head.
Shooting from the hip is the best way to do it, because you're not a typical politician. You're just a human being.
No.
And you're talking to us like a human being. It's really refreshing, actually.
You know what? When you tell the truth and you speak truth and you know what you're talking about and you do research, you don't have to have speeches.
Yeah. Or talking points.
Like when right. I don't need talking points. I know what I'm fighting for. I totally know that it's doable. I know how you're going to pay for it. So, all of those things, but no, I am not a politician. I have no desire to be a politician. This isn't supposed to be that job. This is supposed to be a term of public service, people. That's what it's supposed to be, a term of public service, not a lucrative career. So if that sounds like something you guys want to support, then please send me a few bucks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Send me a few. I hate asking for money. It's like,
No, I feel you. It's necessary though for a campaign. Real quick, what's the date of the primary?
August 20th.
August
So
20th.
we have,
Okay.
yeah, we're August 20th. And for people who, if you happen to be in district and you like what you hear and you're not registered as a Democrat, you need to do so by July 22nd. And it's very easy to do. It can be done online. It can be done in seconds. You don't have to even, nothing has to happen. But if you're a registered Democrat by July 22nd, that is the only way you can vote for me.
All right, well, you heard it here first, folks. Go vote for Jen if you live in that district. If you don't live in that district, send her a couple of bucks because she's fighting for people. And that's a rarity. It really is a rarity. So, Jen, I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you. You're the best. Honestly, you are my favorite. Like, you are the first content creator that wasn't like a personal person that I knew that had me on.
Oh, no kidding?
Yeah, because Jordan was first, but Jordan was friends with Peter. So it's, and I'm not saying Jordan wouldn't have necessarily had me on anyway. He might have, I don't know. But yeah, you are like the first person who really like cared and promoted and spoke, and you still do. I caught that you mentioned, like, if you mention Debbie, you'll mention me. The amount of people that are leftist content creators that bitch about Debbie Wasserman Schultz know that I'm running and don't mention it. People that are even quote unquote friends of mine. And I find that so weird.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to mention her in the news and how vile she is, wouldn't you at least just say, hey, by the way?
Yeah. I mean, we have a way out. So
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jen. Will you take care?
Absolutely. Okay. Bye.